master. The call of the Zohar. To speak of the Zohar is to speak of one of the greatest mysteries in Jewish tradition, a work that is at once a commentary on the Torah, a mythic revelation, a mystical epic, and a poetic tapestry of divine light. For centuries, Jews have turned to the Zohar not only as a text to be studied but as a guide to spiritual transformation, a book whose words are said to illuminate the soul and lift the sparks of holiness scattered throughout creation. To become a master of the Zohar, therefore, is not to hold academic knowledge alone, but to enter into a relationship with the book as a living reality. A master of the Zohar is not one who conquers it, but one who allows it to conquer him or her, shaping mind, heart, and soul into a vessel of divine radiance. Such mastery is not achieved quickly. It unfolds over years and decades of study, prayer, ethical refinement, and inner work. Yet the journey itself is transformative from the very beginning, for every encounter with the Zohar opens new gates of perception. Historically, the idea of a Zohar master finds its roots in the figures who first engaged with the text when it emerged in Spain in the late 13th century. Rabbi Moses de Leon Kama, often associated with the composition and transmission of the Zohar, did not present it as his own invention, but as a revelation of ancient mystical truths passed down from the circle of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in the 2nd century. The Zohar's literary persona is that of Rabbi and his companions, who wander the Galilee revealing hidden mysteries. To be a master of the Zohar is, in some sense, to join their circle, to become one of the Chevreya Kadisha, the holy fellowship, that lives in the constant unfolding of divine wisdom. Later generations ensafed, most famously Rabbi Moshe Cordovero and Rabbi Isaac Luria, took Zoharic teachings as the foundation of new systems of Kabbalah, showing that mastery of the Zohar is not static but creative, generating new insights in every age. Thus, to set out on the path of becoming a Zohar master is to answer a calling. It is to say yes to a lifelong apprenticeship to mystery, to embrace the challenge of walking into a forest of allegory and symbol where every word is a gate and every verse is a cosmos. It is to dedicate oneself to the art of seeing not only what lies on the surface of Torah, but what pulses within it, the inner fire, the splendor concealed in garments of words. The nature of the Zohar. At its heart, the Zohar is a commentary on the Torah, but unlike any commentary that preceded it, its language is not that of halakhic reasoning or narrative explanation, but of mythic storytelling, visionary allegory, and ecstatic meditation. It often reads as a dream or vision where sages wander through landscapes, meet angelic guides, and open verses of Torah to reveal cosmic secrets. The Zohar teaches that the Torah is like a body clothed in garments. The literal words are garments, the stories are the body, and the mysteries beneath them are the soul. A master of the Zohar learns to pierce through the garments, to perceive the soul beneath. The Zohar's Aramaic itself is a language of concealment and revelation. It is not ordinary Aramaic but a deliberate, poetic idiom woven with riddles and symbolic terms. Each word carries multiple layers of meaning, echoing across the 4 levels of interpretation known as Pardes, Peshet, literal, Remez, hint, Derash, homily, and Sod, secret. The Zohar dwells in Sod, yet it constantly interlaces the other levels. A master must therefore be fluent not only in the language, but in the art of layered perception. Furthermore, the Zohar presents its teachings in narrative form, dialogues among companions, parables of kings and queens, tales of wandering mystics. This literary form is not ornamental but essential, for the mysteries of the divine cannot be expressed directly. They must be clothed in stories, images, and riddles so that they both conceal and reveal. A Zohar master learns to read these stories as maps of the soul, to see in the king-queen the Sephirot, Tiferet, and Shekinah, to recognize in the journey of Rashbi's companions the journey of the human soul through exile and redemption. The Zohar is also deeply erotic in its symbolism, speaking continually of the union of male and female, heaven and earth, Tiferet and Shekinah. This language is not crude but exalted, teaching that the divine life itself is a drama of love and separation, yearning and reunion. To master the Zohar is to enter into this cosmic drama, to see prayer, mitzvot, and Torah study as acts that unite the divine couple and restore harmony to the cosmos. Thus, the first task of one who seeks mastery is to learn to see the Zohar for what it is, not a commentary among others, but a mystical symphony, a weaving of Torah, myth, symbol, and vision into a text that both dazzles and overwhelms. The foundations of mastery. Before one can ascend the mountain of Zoharic study, one must lay the foundation stones. The sages taught that a person should not enter the orchard of mysticism without first filling their belly with meat and wine, meaning the revealed aspects of Torah, Bible, Mishnah, Talmud, Halakha. The Zohar assumes intimate familiarity with all these. Its pages are filled with allusions to biblical verses, rabbinic stories, and halakhic rulings, and without this foundation the reader cannot follow its leaps and allusions. Mastery also requires understanding Pardes, the fourfold hermeneutic. Peshet is the plain sense, Remez the hint, Dirash the homiletical expansion, and Sod the secret. The Zohar dwells in Sod, but it constantly draws upon the other levels. To master Sod, one must also be rooted in the others, for the garment cannot be stripped without knowing the body it clothes. Equally important is ethical preparation. The Zohar insists that Torah study without proper intention and purity is dangerous, for it can unleash judgment rather than blessing. A seeker of mastery must cultivate humility, compassion, patience, and purity of heart. Ethical refinement is not optional. It is the very vessel that holds the light of the Zohar. The Kabbalists taught that arrogance, anger, and lust shatter the vessels, while humility, love, and reverence build them. To become a master is therefore not only to study texts, but to shape one's character into a dwelling for the Shekinah. Finally, one must cultivate reverence and intention. The Zohar speaks in flames. To read it is to stand before Sinai anew. Every word must be approached with awe, with the recognition that one is entering a chamber of the king. Without this reverence, study remains superficial. With it, every line becomes a ladder to heaven. The path of study. The practical path to Zohar mastery begins with consistent and disciplined study. Because of its complexity, one does not read the Zohar quickly, but slowly, savoring each word, repeating passages until they sink into the soul. Masters of the tradition often advise beginning with selected passages, the Idra Rabbah, Idra Zuda, and Sifra Dietzinuda, before moving to the full corpus. Over time, the student cycles through the text repeatedly, each reading opening new layers. Language is essential. A Zohar master must learn to read its Aramaic fluently, for translations inevitably flatten the richness of the text. This requires patient effort, comparing commentaries, tracing words back to Hebrew roots, and listening for the echoes between Torah and Zohar. Study at night, especially after midnight, is highly recommended. The Zohar itself teaches that the Shekinah weeps in exile at midnight, and that those who rise to study at that hour bring her comfort and draw blessing upon the world. This practice, known as Tikkun Chatzit, is one of the most powerful ways to attune oneself to the mysteries. In the silence of night, words of Zohar resonate with greater clarity, and the soul is more receptive to the inner light. Study is also communal. The Zohar is filled with conversations among companions, teaching that the deepest mysteries emerge in dialogue. To become a master, one must gather companions for study, a chavruta or study circle, where sparks are kindled through shared insight. Alone one sees little, together the companions create a vessel for revelation. Over time, the words of the Zohar should be memorized, recited, and woven into prayer. A master carries passages in the heart, ready to recall them in moments of prayer or meditation. This transforms the text from something external to something internal, inscribed in the soul itself. Kavanah and contemplative practice. No aspect of Zohar mastery is more crucial than Kavanah, the focused intention that transforms study from intellectual exercise into mystical ascent. The Zohar teaches that every word of Torah corresponds to Sephirotic energies, divine names, and cosmic structures. To read without intention is to utter sounds. To read with intention is to set the Sephirot in motion, uniting Tiferet in Shekinah, sweetening judgments, and drawing blessing into the world. A Zohar master trains the mind to hold multiple levels at once: the surface meaning of the text, the Sephirotic mapping of the words, the divine names hinted within, and the personal application in the soul. Meditation techniques include visualizing the letters in flame, contemplating the Sephirotic tree, and uniting oneself with the flow of divine light described in the text. Prayer becomes an extension of study. The liturgy is read not only with its plain meaning, but with mystical kavanah drawn from the Zohar and later Kabbalists. For example, when reciting the Shema, the master contemplates the unification of divine names described in the Zohar, imagining the fusion of heaven and earth. This transforms prayer into a cosmic act of theurgy, repairing the fractures of creation. Such kavanah requires discipline, but over time it becomes natural, and every word of Torah and prayer becomes a ladder of ascent. The fellowship of study. The Zohar portrays Rashbi and his companions as a holy fellowship who journey together, share insights, and open the gates of mystery. This is no literary device alone, but a teaching in itself. The deepest secrets are revealed in community. A Zohar master therefore seeks companions, creating circles of study that mirror the original Chevre Kadisha. Within such a circle, each member contributes sparks. One raises a question, another provides an interpretation, a third perceives a hidden layer. Together they weave a tapestry of insight richer than any could create alone. This fellowship also provides accountability, ensuring that study remains humble and directed toward divine service rather than personal pride. The role of a teacher is essential. Transmission in Kabbalah is not only textual but oral and spiritual, passed from master to disciple in an unbroken chain. A true Zohar master is not self-invented but shaped within such a lineage, receiving not only knowledge, but the inner light of tradition. Becoming a vessel of splendor. Mastery of the Zohar is measured not only in knowledge but in transformation of character. The Zohar insists that Torah without deeds is empty, and that the true sage is known by compassion, humility, and love. To become a vessel of splendor is to embody the attributes of the Sephirot, loving kindness like Chesed, strength tempered by mercy like Jevurah, balance and beauty like Tiferet. This ethical refinement is itself a mystical act, for the Sephirot are mirrored in the human soul. As one cultivates virtue, one aligns oneself with the divine structure, becoming a living image of the cosmos. The master thus radiates peace, compassion, and holiness, drawing others not only by words but by presence. The mystical vision of the master. With time, the Zohar reshapes perception. The master learns to see the world as the Zohar describes it, every tree, every stone, every word shimmering with sparks of holiness. The mundane dissolves into the luminous, and the soul perceives creation as a living garment of God. This vision is paradoxical. The master knows much, yet knows that the mystery is endless. Every insight opens new questions, every revelation conceals as much as it reveals. True mastery is therefore marked not by certainty but by humility, by the willingness to live within the infinite sea of not knowing, resting in wonder before the infinite light. Modern application. In our time, to become a Zohar master does not mean abandoning modern life, but integrating the wisdom of the Zohar into daily existence. It means balancing scholarship with spirituality, critical study with devotion. Many today approach the Zohar through translation, and while this can open doors, mastery requires eventually learning the Aramaic itself. Modern seekers can cultivate regular study, ethical refinement, meditation, and fellowship, just as in past centuries. Technology provides access to manuscripts, commentaries, and communities across the world, making it possible to participate in a global fellowship of study. Yet the essence remains unchanged: reverence, humility, kavanah, and the willingness to be transformed. To become a Zohar master is not to complete a course of study, but to embark upon an endless journey. The Zohar is like the sea, vast, shimmering, inexhaustible. One may spend a lifetime sailing its waters and still discover new shores. The true master is not one who claims to know everything, but one who has been reshaped by the journey, who lives in constant dialogue with the infinite. The Zohar teaches that the Torah has a body, a soul, and a spirit, and that those who penetrate to the spirit taste the light of the world to come. A master of the Zohar is one who lives in that light already, who walks through this world with eyes that see splendor hidden in all things. Such a person becomes a channel of divine radiance, repairing the world through study, prayer, and deeds of love. Thus, the path to Zohar mastery is open to all who are willing to dedicate themselves with reverence and humility. It is not easy, but every step is filled with light. To take up the Zohar is to take up a mirror of the infinite. To master it is to let oneself be mastered by the light, until one's very being becomes a spark of the splendor it reveals. To approach the Zohar is to stand before a burning mountain. Its words flicker like flames, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, always alive with movement. Becoming a master of the Zohar is not a matter of merely reading or accumulating knowledge. It is a path of inner transformation, an apprenticeship to fire. The Zohar itself warns that woe to the man who says that the Torah comes to tell stories and ordinary matters. For if so, even today we could turn stories of ordinary men into a Torah, and even nicer than those. Rather, the Torah has a body, and the stories are its garments. Whoever thinks that the garment is the Torah itself, and not something more, may his spirit perish, and may he have no portion in the world to come. Therefore the true sages, the servants of the Supreme King, those who stood at Mount Sinai, look only at the soul of the Torah, which is its true essence. Zohar 3:152. This passage reveals the fundamental orientation. The Zohar is not about surface reading, but about piercing through garments to the soul. A master of the Zohar is one who lives continually in this deeper mode of vision, one who knows how to recognize the garment, honor it, but also move through it to reach the inner flame. The first condition of mastery, then, is reverence for the Torah as a living organism, a body with layers, where every verse of scripture is a universe. To sit with the Zohar is to be initiated into the endless unveiling of Torah. This is why the Zohar so often stages its revelations as the Chevreya Kadisha, the holy fellowship of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his companions, walking together, speaking, questioning, and suddenly opening worlds of meaning from a single verse. For example, when Rabbi and his disciples encounter the verse, "Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these." Isaiah chapter 40 verse 26, they immediately move beyond the plain sense to discover the entire mystery of creation hidden in the word me, who, which signifies the hidden supernal mother, and the word ele, these, which signifies the lower revealed world. Who created these is revealed as the unification of hidden and revealed, upper and lower, transcendent and immanent. The Zohar comments, "The world is established on this mystery, and whoever contemplates it enters into the secret of faith." Zohar 2:42b. A master is therefore not one who explains verses, but one who dwells in the mysteries they conceal, finding in every word a ladder of ascent. The path to such vision requires discipline, for the Zohar is not an easy book. Its Aramaic is deliberately veiled, its symbols cryptic, its teachings scattered through tales and parables. The student must be patient, cycling through the text again and again, learning its rhythms, its favored terms, its hidden codes. Over time the words become familiar companions, and the student begins to perceive the echoes that bind the text together, how a teaching in one place illuminates a riddle in another. The Zohar itself describes this process. The Torah calls to a person every day, saying, "Come to me, come to me." Whoever turns toward her is blessed, but whoever turns away is rebuked. The Torah says to him, "I called you every day, and you did not turn toward me. You loved sleep more than wisdom." Zohar 3:85b. The path of mastery is thus daily dedication, a willingness to hear the Torah calling and to answer, even when the words seem dark or impenetrable. The master knows that even when no light appears, study itself is already planting seeds of illumination. Yet study alone is insufficient. The Zohar insists repeatedly that Torah study, without kavanah, the inner intention, is like a body without a soul. Words of Torah ascend only when uttered with intention of the heart. Then they rise and stand before the Holy One, blessed be He, and He delights in them. Zohar 2:162. To master the Zohar, one must learn to read not only with the mind but with the heart and soul, investing every word with intention. This intention is not abstract but specific. To unify the divine names, to heal the fractures of the cosmos, to bring Shekinah out of exile and join her to the Holy One. Every letter and word is a spark to be ignited by focused kavanah. Thus, mastery means training the inner eye to perceive the Sephirotic dynamics hidden in the text, so that reading itself becomes a mystical act, uniting the upper and lower worlds. This is why the practice of night study is so central. The Zohar declares, "At midnight, when the Holy One enters the Garden of Eden to delight with the righteous, then all who rise at that time and engage in Torah are joined with the Shekinah. They and the Shekinah enter before the Holy King, and He delights with them." Zohar 13b. Midnight becomes a gate of intimacy with the divine, when the barriers are thin and the Shekinah seeks companionship. A true master therefore trains the body and soul to rise in the stillness of night, to chant passages of Zohar in the dark, and to let the words illuminate the inner chambers of the heart. This practice, repeated over years, engraves the text not only in the mind but in the very rhythms of life. Yet the Zohar also teaches that wisdom does not descend upon the isolated seeker alone. Rashbi's circle is a constant reminder that mystery is revealed in fellowship. When companions sit together and engage in Torah, the Shekinah is among them, and their words are inscribed above. If they sit in joy of Torah, the Holy One, blessed be He, rejoices in them and calls peace upon them. Zohar 3:85b. A master of the Zohar therefore cultivates companions, forming circles of study where each participant contributes sparks, and where joy in the Torah becomes a magnet for revelation. Just as the Sephirot cannot act in isolation but only in harmony, so two human seekers must join together to manifest the fullness of divine wisdom. In parallel with study and fellowship, ethical refinement is indispensable. The Zohar insists, the Holy One, blessed be He, does not dwell where there is anger, pride, or deceit, but only where there is humility, joy, and truth. Zohar 2:122b. To master the Zohar without mastering oneself is impossible, for the vessel must be prepared to hold the light. The Kabbalists of Seift, following the Zohar, emphasized purification of intention, guarding of speech, charity, and acts of kindness as prerequisites for mystical attainment. For the Sephirotic energies revealed in the Zohar are not abstractions, they are mirrors of human traits. To embody Chesed is to practice love and generosity. To embody Gevurah is to practice self-discipline and justice. To embody Tiferet is to balance beauty and compassion. Mastery of the Zohar is therefore measured not in pages read, but in virtues embodied. As the seeker advances, the Zohar itself begins to reshape perception. Ordinary events take on symbolic resonance, for the world becomes transparent to the divine drama described in the text. The king-queen of the Zohar are no longer distant symbols, but living presences in daily prayer. Every mitzvah becomes a unification of masculine and feminine, every blessing an act of repairing the Shekinah. The master sees sparks of holiness hidden in stones, plants, and faces, and feels called to liberate them through acts of mindfulness and kindness. The Zohar confirms this vision when it says, "Come and see, all things, both above and below, are one mystery of faith, and all are bound together, one in another. Blessed is the lot of the righteous who know and perceive this mystery." Zohar 2:161a. Ultimately, mastery of the Zohar is not about possession, but about surrender. One never conquers the Zohar. One is conquered by it. Its vastness humbles, its riddles confound, its light blinds even as it illuminates. The true master is therefore marked not by arrogance, but by humility, by the recognition that every insight is only the beginning of deeper mysteries. The Zohar itself concludes, the Torah has 70 faces, and every word that is revealed conceals within it another word. The wise one is he who perceives the light within the light, and does not cling to one form alone. Zohar 2:99. To become a master is to live in this infinite unfolding, to let the Zohar continually remake one's understanding, to remain always a student even at the height of wisdom. Thus, the path to becoming a Zohar master is not a single road but a weaving of many, rigorous study of text and language, cultivation of kavanah and meditation, nightly vigils of learning, companionship in holy fellowship, ethical refinement, prayer, infused with mystical intention, and above all humility before the endless sea of Torah. To walk this path is already to taste the world to come, for the Zohar is itself a bridge between worlds, a ladder upon which the soul ascends and descends. In time, the master ceases to be simply a reader of the Zohar, and becomes instead a living embodiment of its teaching, a vessel of splendor through whom divine light flows into the world. To truly study the Zohar and grow toward mastery, one must first understand that this text is unlike any other. It is not simply a book to be read, but a living ocean of divine mysteries, and approaching it requires patience, humility, and the cultivation of a disciplined rhythm of life. The first step is to acknowledge the Zohar's original language, Aramaic. Even if one cannot attain fluency, the very act of learning a few key words, repeating the sacred phrases aloud, and attuning the ear to their sound awakens a resonance in the soul. If one must rely on translation, the study should not be casual. It must be guided by the commentaries of great masters such as the Sulam of Ashlag or modern annotated translations like Daniel Matt's Pritzker edition. These works decode the layers of symbolism, revealing the Zohar's hidden associations between biblical stories, Sephirotic structures, and the secret drama of exile and redemption. Without commentary, the Zohar can easily overwhelm or mislead, for it hides its truths in riddles. With commentary, however, its symbols begin to shimmer and disclose their meaning. The structure of study is equally important. Unlike other sacred texts that invite us straight through reading, the Zohar is not meant to be consumed line by line from start to finish. Its design is cyclical, like the soul's own journeys of ascent and return. For this reason, the beginner must focus first on foundational passages, the opening chapters on Genesis that discuss creation, the luminous assemblies known as Idra Rabbah and Idra Zuda, the Book of Concealment, Sifra Ditzin Yuda, and the Tikkune, Zohar, which offers 70 meditations on the word Bereshit. These sections form the backbone of the mystical worldview and train the mind to think in Zoharic patterns. Only after a grounding in these texts should one begin to follow the Zohar's full biblical commentary. In this way, the student builds an inner architecture, a vessel strong enough to hold the light. Yet the Zohar insists that understanding does not come through intellect alone but through intention, what the Kabbalists call kavanah. Reading the Zohar is an act of prayer, and the reader should prepare with a moment of silence or a short supplication, aligning the study with the unification of the Holy One and His Shekinah. The words should be read aloud, slowly, and with reverence. Even if every word is not understood, the very vibration of the syllables is itself a form of illumination, for the Zohar was composed in a tongue that is as much angelic chant as human language. After reading, the student should pause, meditate on the sephirot that appeared in the passage, and imagine them as living lights in the soul and cosmos. This moment of contemplation turns the study into a spiritual ascent rather than a purely intellectual exercise. Time plays a crucial role in this process. The Zohar itself praises study at midnight, the hour called Chatzit, when Shekinah wanders in exile and seeks companions, rising at midnight to recite Tikkun Chatzit and to immerse in even a few lines of Zohar is considered by the mystics to be a supreme act of devotion, joining one's voice with the sorrow and hope of the divine presence. If midnight is impossible, the hours just before dawn or after the evening prayer hold similar sanctity. The student should strive to weave Zoharic study into the rhythm of daily life, ideally setting aside half an hour to an hour each day. In the beginning, this may simply be reading a short passage with commentary, but over time, the practice should deepen into a natural cycle of daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly discipline. A suggested daily rhythm begins with a moment of intention, followed by 15 to 30 minutes of reading the Zohar itself, then 10 or 15 minutes of reviewing a commentary, and finally a few minutes of meditation or reflection. Even this short daily practice opens hidden gates. Each week, it is wise to choose an anchor passage, such as the Zohar's teaching on the Shema or the first verses of Genesis, and return to it repeatedly, allowing its symbols to sink deeper into memory. Weekly study with others is also invaluable, for the Zohar was revealed in fellowship among Rabbi and his holy companions, and its spirit unfolds most fully when read in dialogue. Once a month, one should turn to a major mystical section such as the Idra Rabbah, reading it slowly across the month to absorb its cosmic vision. At least once a month, if possible, the student should rise at midnight to read, for even one midnight vigil can illuminate the soul for many days. Across the span of a year, a disciplined student can complete the Zohar's sections on Genesis, study the Idra Rabbah and Idra Zuda, and taste portions of the Tikkun Zohar. The following year, the cycle can move on to Exodus and Leviticus, with further mystical treatises interwoven. This yearly rhythm ensures that the student is not overwhelmed, but slowly builds a foundation of knowledge and experience layer by layer. Over many years, one may then approach the full Zohar with greater confidence. To strengthen this process, it is wise to memorize a few passages, repeat them in prayer, and carry them in the heart. A journal kept alongside the study, filled with notes, dreams, and sudden insights, also helps trace the subtle ways the Zohar begins to speak to the soul. Ultimately, the study of the Zohar is not about accumulating knowledge but about transformation. The true Zohar master is one who has purified his character, who has softened anger, cultivated compassion, humbled pride, and aligned his daily actions with the light he reads. The Zohar itself teaches that one who studies without refining the self is like a vessel filled with wine, but leaking through cracks. Mastery is not found in reciting verses but in embodying them. Each time a passage is read, the student should ask, how does this unite me with the divine presence? How does this guide my conduct in the world? In this way, the Zohar becomes not a distant text but a mirror, a companion, and a source of endless renewal. The path to mastery of the Zohar is a structured journey of 20 years or more, designed to transform not only the intellect but the heart, the soul, and the way one lives in the world. The first stage, covering approximately the first decade, is dedicated to building a strong foundation in the language, structure, and conceptual framework of the Zohar so that its mysteries can be approached without confusion or distortion. During these years, the student should begin with the Zohar Bereshit, reading alongside Rabbi Moshe Cordovero's Pardes Rimonim, which provides an essential map of the Sephirot, Partsufim, and divine processes, clarifying the hidden structure of the text. This is the time to develop fluency in the Aramaic of the Zohar and to study introductory works such as the Sefer Yetzirah and Shoari Ora in order to establish a strong symbolic and linguistic grounding. Study should be daily and disciplined, with passages memorized and reflected upon, while Kavanah, mystical intentions, are integrated even at this earliest stage. Weekly group discussions or study circles, even in a small format, are important so that the student begins to cultivate the dynamic interplay of personal insight and communal illumination. By the second stage, spanning roughly years 3 to 10, the student moves from structural understanding into the depths of Lurianic transformation, where the Zohar becomes a living manual for meditation, intention, and cosmic rectification. This stage should begin with focused study of the Zohar Bereshit and sections of the Tikkuni Zohar, guided primarily by the Aris Etz Hayim and Shar HaKavanah. These works transform the Zohar's symbolic language into meditative practice, teaching how to work with Kavanah in prayer and how to translate symbolic structures into spiritual work. At this stage, study becomes thematic, focusing deeply on the exile and redemption of the Shekinah, the interaction of the Sephirot, and the hidden unity of the Torah. The student should develop the habit of journaling mystical impressions and organizing their study around themes rather than linear progression, revisiting previously studied sections with new eyes. Practice should now include daily Kavanah, regular small group study, and periods of concentrated retreat or extended meditation to deepen experiential connection. The third stage, encompassing roughly years 6 through 10, brings the dimension of textual precision, halakhic grounding, and ethical integration. This is the stage to work closely with the Vilna Gaon's glosses and marginalia on the Zohar, bringing clarity and depth to prior learning. The focus should broaden to include Zohar Vayikra and Zohar Bamidbar, read alongside both the Gaon's commentary and selected Hasidic teachings such as the Sfat Emet, which bring a devotional and ethical dimension to the study. The practice here should combine deep individual study with regular teaching, discussion, and group reflection, so that understanding becomes living wisdom rather than mere intellectual knowledge. The student should begin to integrate Zoharic concepts into daily life, allowing the language and imagery of the text to influence prayer, speech, and ethical action. The fourth stage, years 11 through 20, is the period of Hasidic and ethical integration, where study becomes a way of living and teaching. In these years, the student should immerse deeply in advanced sections of the Zohar such as Zohar Devarim and the Idrit, pairing them with the mystical commentaries of the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and Sefer HaTemunah. These works translate the Zohar's cosmic vision into the language of heartfelt devotion, turning study into a living art of spiritual transformation. Practice should include regular daily prayer with Kavanah, Hibadadit, personal meditation, yearly retreats focused on intensive study of chosen sections, and the integration of the Zohar's language into ordinary life. Teaching should become central, as explaining the Zohar to others strengthens and refines one's own mastery. By this stage, study should be cyclical rather than linear, revisiting all previously studied material through the deep lens of lived experience. In the fifth stage, 20 years and beyond, Study of the Zohar becomes a living, breathing reality rather than a project. At this point, the seeker moves into a cyclical rhythm of immersion, revisiting all sections of the Zohar with the maturity of decades of practice, integrating the teachings of Cordovero, the Ari, the Vilna Gaon, and the Hasidic masters into a single living tradition. Study becomes intuitive, guided by spiritual need rather than sequence, and every day becomes an opportunity for renewal and deepening. Teaching, guiding, and transmitting become a primary expression of mastery, as the student becomes a vessel of the Zohar's light. The culmination of this path is not the completion of study, but the embodiment of the Zohar itself, where the words cease to be a distant text and become the living voice of God within the soul, shaping thought, speech, prayer, and action. In this way, the 20-year curriculum leads not only to mastery but to transformation, turning the study of the Zohar into a lifelong covenant and a path of divine union. The first month of Zohar study should be dedicated to establishing foundations. One must begin by approaching the text as one would approach a sacred mountain, with reverence and awe. This month is not about quantity but about tuning the ear and the heart to the sound of Zoharic language. It is best to start with the opening passages on Bereshit, Genesis, where the mysteries of creation and divine emanation are revealed in the primal word in the beginning. Read only a few lines each day, perhaps with the Sulam commentary. Daniel Matt's notes, and focus on savoring the symbolism rather than understanding everything at once. In these early weeks, spend time learning to recognize key Aramaic words and phrases, repeating them aloud until they feel familiar. If possible, rise one night each week at midnight and read these passages in stillness, offering your study as a companion to the Shekinah in exile. This month is about setting the tone, slow, reverent, and rooted in the awareness that the Zohar is not merely read but lived. In the second month, once the student has become more comfortable with the rhythms of daily reading, the focus should shift to the great mystical assemblies, the Idra Rabbah and Idra Zuda. These are not texts to be rushed. They unfold the vision of divine faces, the mysteries of the Ancient of Days, and the inner anatomy of the Godhead is expressed through the Sephirot. Read these slowly, perhaps only a few paragraphs each study session, and let their imagery seep into the imagination. The goal this month is not to analyze the metaphors, but to allow them to form inner landscapes, to see the Sephirot as luminous configurations within and around you. Make notes of recurring images, crowns, beards, garments of light, and begin to notice how they correspond to different states of mind and soul. Continue the midnight practice if possible, and if not, devote special time after nightfall when the world grows quiet. This month introduces the seeker to the grandeur of Zoharic cosmology, which must be absorbed through repeated exposure rather than logical dissection. The third month should be devoted to the Sifra Ditziniuta, the Book of Concealment, a short but profound treatise within the Zohar that condenses creation into a series of veiled illusions. Here the student learns that mastery of the Zohar involves embracing mystery rather than solving it. Read this text with the awareness that it is intentionally obscure, a kind of koan in Kabbalistic form, designed to awaken intuition. Each day, read a small section and sit with its images, the balance of male and female, the secret of primordial contraction, the garments of the concealed one. In your journal, note not only your intellectual understanding but also your feelings, impressions, and the ways in which the text reshapes your inner perception. This is also a good month to practice short periods of visualization meditation, imagining the Sephirotic tree of life as a living body of light in correspondence with your own. The fourth month turns to the Tikkuni Zohar, which offers 70 interpretations of the word Bereshit. This month should be seen as a deepening of the first month's foundation. Choose one interpretation each week and study it carefully, repeating its language and reflecting on its images. The Tikkuni Zohar is a manual of mystical contemplation, showing how every single letter of Torah conceals entire universes of meaning. The discipline here is to train the mind to think in multi-layered patterns, to see in every word a gateway to infinite associations. This practice naturally overflows into prayer and daily life, for soon the student will begin to perceive ordinary words and actions as vessels of divine mystery. By the fifth month, the seeker has tasted the primal texts of the Zohar and is ready to integrate study with ethical refinement. This month should focus on passages that describe the Shekinah, her exile, and her yearning for union with the Holy One. Study how the Zohar portrays human deeds as either aiding or hindering this union and begin to apply these teachings to daily life. The practice here is to align every action, eating, speaking, working, loving, with the intention of uniting the Sephirot. Journal about successes and failures, noting how ethical refinement is not separate from mystical study, but its very foundation. This month one learns that becoming a Zohar master is not only about knowledge, but about character and alignment of the heart. The 6th month should be dedicated to deepening communal study. The Zohar was born in the fellowship of Rabbi and his companions, and no one becomes a master alone. In this period, seek out a study circle, whether in person or online, and commit to sharing the text in dialogue with others. Choose a section of Zohar commentary on Exodus or Leviticus, such as the story of the crossing of the Red Sea, and study it together, allowing the group dynamic to reveal insights that solitary reading may conceal. If no group is available, read aloud and imagine yourself as part of Rabbi's circle, hearing their voices in your mind. Record your insights as though you were conversing with hidden companions. The practice of fellowship deepens humility and prevents the pride of solitary interpretation. In the 7th month, return to solitary discipline with renewed strength. This is a time to focus on memorization and repetition of key passages. Choose 3 to 5 Zoharic texts that resonate deeply, perhaps on the unity of Shema, on the Sabbath, or on the image of the tree of life, and commit them to memory. Repeat them each morning or night, reciting them aloud until they are inscribed on the heart. These passages become companions, arising in prayer, in dreams, and in moments of struggle. Mastery of the Zohar is not measured in pages read but in words carried in the soul, ready to illuminate the mind at any moment. The 8th month should be devoted to cultivating mystical intention during study and prayer. The focus here is not on new sections of the Zohar, but on practicing Kavanah, linking the words to the Sephirot and visualizing their unifications. When reading a passage about Chesed, imagine streams of loving kindness flowing through you. When studying about Jevira, feel the strength of divine discipline. Use the Sephirotic tree as a meditative map, connecting text, symbol, and inner state. This practice transforms reading into an act of cosmic repair, aligning personal consciousness with the structure of creation. In the 9th month, expand the field of study by engaging with secondary texts inspired by the Zohar, such as the writings of the Ari or the Hasidic masters who drew on its imagery. Choose a section of the Zohar and then read how later mystics interpreted it, comparing their voices with your own insights. This reveals how the Zohar is a living text, constantly re-embodied in new generations. The goal this month is to see oneself as part of this living chain, a student who is also a vessel for new understanding. The 10th month should focus on the practice of Tikkun Chatzit more intensively. Aim to rise at midnight once or twice each week and devote that time to reading passages about Shekinah in exile, reciting the laments of Tikkun Rachel, and then studying the Zohar by candlelight. This practice engraves the study into the soul with a power unlike any other. It is not only intellectual but existential. To sit in the darkness and read of the divine presence weeping awakens deep empathy and unites the student with the very heart of the Zohar. The 11th month turns attention to the integration of study with mitzvot and daily acts. Choose passages that speak of Shabbat, of prayer, or of ethical deeds, and consciously practice them during the week. The Zohar constantly insists that study without action is hollow, and action without study is blind. In this month, make each deed a commentary on the Zohar and each study session a preparation for holy living. Keep a journal of these integrations, noting how the boundaries between text and life begin to dissolve. Finally, the 12th month is a time of review, integration, and celebration. Return to the passages studied throughout the year and read them again, noting how they now appear with new depth and clarity. Review your notes and journal, seeing how your perception has shifted. Spend time in prayer, offering thanks for the year of illumination, and set intentions for the next cycle. For mastery is not an end but an eternal journey. The Zohar is an endless sea, and after 1 year of immersion, the student has only dipped a hand into its waters. But this hand now glows with the light of hidden wisdom, and the student is no longer a beginner, but a companion on the path of Rabbi and his holy fellowship. In the 2nd year of study, the seeker moves from foundations into greater breadth. Having spent the 1st year with Genesis, the mystical assemblies, the Book of Concealment, and the Tikkun Zohar, the student is now prepared to journey further into the Zohar's biblical commentary. This year should focus on Exodus and Leviticus, where the Zohar reveals the mysteries of redemption, covenant, and sacrifice. The passages on the Exodus from Egypt, the splitting of the Red Sea, and the giving of Torah at Sinai should be read with great care, for they are not mere stories, but revelations of how the soul escapes bondage and ascends to divine union. Alongside this, the student should study Zoharic commentaries on Shabbat and on the Mishkan, tabernacle, for these texts anchor the mystical vision in concrete practices of time and space. This is also the year to deepen the discipline of Tikkun Chatzit, aiming for more regular midnight vigils, even if only once or twice each week. By the end of the second year, the seeker should have internalized not only the creation and exile motifs of Genesis, but also the great drama of liberation and covenant, seeing them not as history but as the soul's own unfolding path. The third year is a time of immersion in the more esoteric treatises of the Zohar. By now, the student has developed the patience to dwell with difficult texts and the courage to enter its most complex visions. This is the year to engage more fully with the Idra Rabbah and Idra Zuda, revisiting them with new eyes, and to explore the esoteric sections scattered throughout the Zohar that speak of the Ancient of Days, the Partsufim, divine countenances, and the mysteries of divine gender. The seeker should also begin to memorize longer passages, committing whole paragraphs of Zohar to heart, for it is through repeated recitation that the text inscribes itself upon the soul. This is a good time to expand fellowship, joining with a group of companions who can study difficult sections together, arguing and interpreting, much as the circle of Rashbi once did. In this year, the seeker also begins to experiment with meditative techniques, visualizing the Sephirot as radiant spheres, using divine names to focus the mind, and practicing short periods of contemplative silence after reading, allowing the words of the Zohar to reverberate inwardly. The fourth year marks a transition from being a diligent student to becoming a vessel of teaching. The Zohar itself insists that wisdom must flow outward. It cannot be hoarded. At this stage, the seeker should begin sharing passages and insights with others, whether by leading a small study group, giving short teachings, or even writing reflections on the text. Teaching is not an act of pride but of service, for the light of the Zohar multiplies when it is given away. This is also the year to study the Tikkun Zohar more systematically, perhaps working through several of the 70 Tikkunim and meditating on how each reveals new facets of the word Bereshit. The student should now also begin to link Zohar study with daily mitzvot more consciously. Reciting the Zoharic commentary on the Shema before bed, reading Zohar passages on Shabbat, or meditating on the Shekinah's exile before prayer. The boundary between text and life should begin to dissolve, so that every act is illuminated by Zoharic imagery. By the fifth year, the seeker is no longer a beginner, but is walking the path of mastery. At this stage, the goal is not to cover more text, but to integrate more deeply. One might choose to cycle through the entire Zohar across several years, reading slowly with commentary. But the emphasis should now be on Yechudim, inner unifications of thought, word, and deed. The student should be able to open the Zohar to a passage and immediately connect it to Sephirotic dynamics, divine attributes, and ethical practice. Midnight study should be a regular rhythm, at least weekly, and memorized passages should be recited as living prayers. Fellowship remains crucial, but now the seeker is also called to guide others, creating small communities of study, where the Zohar's light can multiply. Most importantly, the fifth year is the time when the Zohar's mystical vision should permeate the student's way of seeing the world. To look at the stars and recall the Zohar's cosmic images. To see every meal as a unification of Shekinah and Tiferet, and to experience daily life as a constant commentary on the hidden Torah. At this point, the student is not a master in the sense of completion, for the Zohar has no end. Rather, mastery is measured by the degree to which the text lives inside the soul, shaping perception, conduct, and consciousness. True mastery is not about finishing pages but about becoming a vessel of light, one who embodies the humility, compassion, and devotion that the Zohar demands. The path of 3 to 5 years is only the beginning of a lifelong journey, but it establishes a rhythm of study, contemplation, and practice that can carry the seeker forward for decades. In this way, the Zohar ceases to be a book outside oneself and becomes an inner Torah, a wellspring of endless light, guiding every breath toward union with the divine presence. Beyond the 5-year threshold lies what can be called the path of a lifetime, where study of the Zohar is no longer measured in chapters or commentaries, but in transformation of the self. In this stage, the scholar becomes an eternal student, one who reads not to finish but to renew, and whose life itself becomes a living commentary on the hidden Torah. The first decade beyond foundational mastery should be dedicated to deep cyclical study, returning again and again to the great arcs of the Zohar with new eyes, and allowing the text to speak differently each time. One might dedicate years to a single tractate or thematic section, several years on the Idrit, a decade revisiting Tikkun Zohar, and long seasons devoted to the Shekinah and the nature of exile. This is a time when study is not a project to complete, but an unfolding conversation, where one's heart responds anew to every verse as though hearing it for the first time. In this way, study deepens into what the mystics call hibadet, intimate dwelling with the words of the Zohar, so that they become a living prayer. By the second decade of study, the master's work becomes less about personal acquisition and more about transmission. Here the emphasis shifts toward teaching, guiding others into the depths of the Zohar without losing the humility of the student. The master learns to read the text as Rashbi might have done, not only decoding its mysteries, but opening doors for others to enter. Teaching in this phase is not confined to lecture halls. It becomes woven into the fabric of life, in conversation with students, in moments of prayer, in the silent gestures of daily living. The master begins to integrate Zoharic insight with life cycle rituals, births, weddings, death, and mourning, seeing in each a living reflection of the Sephirot in the cosmic drama of the Torah. This is also the stage where the master begins to experiment with practical Kabbalah as described in the Zohar, using letter combinations, divine names, and the Sephirot for spiritual ascent and healing, while guarding these teachings with discretion and reverence. The second decade of Zohar study, years 11 through 20, is the stage of Lurianic and Hasidic transformation, where the student moves beyond structural mastery into living mystical embodiment, teaching, and ethical integration. Year 11 should be a year of deep immersion into Zohar Devarim and advanced sections of the Tikkun Zohar, studied alongside the Ari Shar HaKavanot. The focus here should be on integrating Kavanot into daily prayer and life, cultivating a constant awareness of the Shekinah's presence, and linking textual study to the reality of divine service. Meditation practice should be extended, with at least one extended retreat or concentrated period of study per quarter, allowing for deep immersion and experiential integration. The student should begin to develop their own system of Kavanot and meditations based on their reading and experiences, documenting these practices systematically in a study journal. Years 12 through 14 should be years of thematic mastery and cyclical review. Study should continue in Zohar Devarim, moving gradually to Zohar Idrit and advanced portions of Zohar Bamidbar, while returning regularly to earlier sections with the perspective of lived practice. Hasidic commentaries, especially Sfat Emet and the writings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, should be introduced in parallel, deepening the ethical and devotional dimension of study. This period should also focus on developing the ability to articulate the teachings of the Zohar in one's own words, through teaching circles, written essays, or recorded reflections, as teaching transforms comprehension into mastery. Meditative discipline should be intensified, aiming for a daily practice that blends Kavanot with hibadet, contemplative prayer, and active ethical reflection. Year 15 should be a year of synthesis, integrating all the major themes studied to this point. The student should return to the Aris Etz Haim as a masterwork of synthesis, studying it alongside sections of Zohar Bereshit, Zohar Devarim, and Idrit. Meditation and Kavanot should now be so embedded in daily life that study of the Zohar is inseparable from lived devotion. This is also the point where the student should develop a personal teaching method for the Zohar, a system that blends textual study, meditation, and ethical application. Retreats in this year should be longer and more intensive, with at least one extended retreat of several weeks devoted to deep study, prayer, and meditative immersion. Years 16 through 18 should deepen the synthesis by focusing on the cyclical return to the Zohar as living revelation rather than academic text. This stage should involve thematic study cycles, revisiting all major sections in rotation, each time with fresh insight and deeper understanding. Study should also integrate more advanced commentaries, including Sefer HaTemuna and the writings of the Baal Shem Tov, connecting Zoharic study to the lived Hasidic tradition of joy, love, and divine union. Teaching should be a central practice at this stage, both within formal study circles and through more informal sharing of insights. Meditation and Kavanot should be refined, with the goal of creating a personal daily practice that is intuitive and self-sustaining. Year 19 should be a year of consolidation and preparation for mastery. The student should return to all earlier study with the clarity of long experience, rereading sections that have proved especially powerful and returning to commentaries that have deepened understanding. This is also the time to begin compiling personal meditations, Kavanot, and interpretative insights into a living compendium, a personal Zohar mastery journal that becomes both a record and a guide for further study. Retreats should be a regular feature of this year, and teaching should become central to the student's practice, as sharing the living Zohar with others transforms mastery into transmission. Year 20 is the culmination of the formal curriculum, the stage of mastery. This year should be marked by a cyclical and intuitive approach to the Zohar, moving freely between sections, returning constantly to themes of exile and redemption, concealment and revelation, unity and multiplicity. The student should now treat the Zohar not as a subject of study but as a living Torah, allowing its language and vision to permeate prayer, meditation, speech, and action. At this stage, study becomes a lifelong covenant and teaching becomes a primary mode of practice. The goal is no longer completion but embodiment, to live as one for whom the Zohar is not a distant mystical text, but the living voice of God in the heart. Mastery, in this sense, is not measured by the number of volumes studied but by the transformation of life itself, where every moment becomes an opportunity to read, pray, meditate, and act in the light of the Zohar. Thus, the 20-year path to mastery moves from foundational preparation through deep study and meditative practice into integration, teaching, and embodiment, culminating in the realization that the Zohar is not merely a text to be studied. It is a way of living, a covenant of the heart, and a continuous journey toward divine union. In the third decade, the master enters a stage of profound inner refinement. By this point, study is no longer a matter of accumulation but of embodiment. One has memorized vast sections of the Zohar, and they now live in the heart as a treasury of wisdom. Reading becomes less about analysis and more about listening to the divine voice that speaks through the text in silence. The master cultivates a daily rhythm of Kavanah, meditating not only on passages, but on the entire structure of the Zohar as a living organism. Prayer, study, and life merge into a single sacred act. This decade is also when the master begins to explore the deepest mystical dimensions of the Zohar, the hidden names, the secret structures of the Sephirot, and the angelic worlds, while continually returning to the simple ground of ethical living. The practice here becomes one of unity, living each day in the awareness that Torah is not a book but the reality itself. The fourth decade of mastery is marked by what the great Kabbalists call the flowering of inner wisdom. By now, study of the Zohar is no longer bound to time or place. The master carries the text in memory, in heart, in breath. At this stage, there is no longer a separation between teacher and student, for the master has become a living vessel for the Zohar's light. Every word spoken, every act performed, becomes a reflection of the hidden Torah. This period is a time of silent transmission. One teaches through presence, example, and the life one lives rather than through formal study alone. The master becomes like the ancient sages of Safed, a living embodiment of the Zohar's truth, a guide for seekers who come without names or questions. At this point, study often deepens into cycles of renewal. Years may be devoted to revisiting the Zohar through the lens of life experience, reading it with the insight born of decades, as if one were entering the text for the first time. In the fifth decade and beyond, the master's path is not so much about study as about being a vessel of illumination. The Zohar becomes less a text and more a living presence within the soul. Study continues, but it is now a contemplative practice woven into every breath, every encounter, every action. At this stage, the master embodies what the Zohar describes as the harmony of all Sephirot, living in continuous alignment with the unity of the hidden and revealed. This is the stage of full mystical integration. where life itself becomes a prayer, and the act of being is the continual reading of the hidden Torah. The master no longer seeks mastery as an achievement, but walks as one who knows that the path is infinite, and that every moment of life is an opportunity to deepen the union of heaven and earth. Thus, to become a Zohar master is not to arrive at a destination, but to enter a lifelong ascent. It is to accept the text as both teacher and mystery, to cultivate humility, patience, and devotion, and to carry the hidden light of Torah into every aspect of life. True mastery is measured not in the number of texts read or commentaries mastered, but in the degree to which the soul is transformed, so that every thought, word, and action becomes a living echo of the Zohar's eternal song. The path of decades shapes not only the intellect but the very heart, and the Zohar, in the hands of such a master, becomes the breath of life itself.